The first session is by, the first presentation is by Frances Ligler from North Carolina State University. The title of her presentation is The Path to a License. Frances?
Okay, good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here today, and thank you all for coming. Hopefully I can figure out how to work this. So up until 3.5 years ago, I was at the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory. For those of you who are not familiar with this area, it's a very entrepreneurial organization. Scientists are not funded by the Navy, and engineers are not funded by the Navy. They go out and get their own funding to do work that they consider of value to the nation. And that's how I got involved in this process of innovation and technology transfer. I've continued that effort as a university faculty member and discovered that while I'm not a serial entrepreneur, I am a serial inventor. I do like the process of inventing. I like the process of solving problems, but as a government employee, I was not allowed to start a company to develop the technology, and now I've discovered that that was really a good thing for me. One of the problems I've become aware of is there are very few female inventors, relatively, on patents that are submitted to the patent office, and that's something I think needs to be changed. And so I've been asking myself, why is that? And I think part of the reason is that particularly at universities, but in many cases, we are sold the concept that if we want to capitalize on our inventions, we have to start a company. That's a tremendous commitment of time, and particularly for women who are concerned with bringing up kids, having a family, and establishing a work-life balance, and more increasingly for men as well. There is another path, and that's what I want to talk to you about today, and that's the path of licensing your technology to an existing company or another startup company, as opposed to trying to do it all yourself. So what are the advantages of that path? You can look, for me, one of the biggest advantages was I could look for the best partner. Whether it was a small company, a medium-sized company, a large company, I could look for a partner that had the enthusiasm for the technology, hopefully the ability to market that technology, and an understanding of the customer that would use the technology. I did not have to do all of that myself. Furthermore, I didn't have to go out and find a CEO and a CTO and a good attorney. So I did not have to assume responsibility for the business side of things or find people to do it. So many times I hear my colleagues saying, we want to start a company, but how do we find the right CEO, or how do we find the right business people? And even when they do, sometimes they don't know how to give up control and let that person who knows more about the business take over. So these are things you don't have to worry about if you license the technology. Obviously, you don't have as much control. I always liken an invention or an innovation that comes out of your own ideas as kind of growing your children. You come up with the infant and you grow it into something that knows what they're doing. It becomes fully fleshed out and tested, and then it goes off on its own. You lose control when you give that license to another company, and I'll show you in a minute some places that didn't work very well for me. But there is also the issue of financial reward. That probably isn't as great if you don't start your own company. But for me, that was never the major incentive for bringing technology through the license process. I always wanted to get my technology in the hands of the user so that they could use it to solve their problems. And that was the big driver, and that was the rationale for going through the patent process in the first place. The dollars and cents was not my major motivation. So these are some of the products that have come out of my laboratory. The ones with the stars on them are ones that are still commercially available. Not all of them are. As I mentioned, I did have some experiences that were not so great. The one on the left was the first automated sensor that we built for testing for biological warfare agents. And we went out to Dugway Proving Ground and demonstrated we could collect bacteria out of the air, identify it, flying blind circles in the dark, and radio the data back to the ground before it hit the user on the ground. Well, 4 months after that study was done and we proved that, yes, we could do it, the military came out with a report saying it would be at least 4 years before anyone could do that, and there was no point in developing a concept of operations. So it got stuck on the shelf. There is a definite disadvantage to being ahead of your time. The one on the right actually got FDA approval. It's a test for drugs of abuse in saliva, does 5 different drugs of abuse and alcohol in saliva. It was so small they stuck it in a case, inside the case on a computer, and it worked really well, but the company was mismanaged and went bankrupt, and by the time all that was sorted out and we got our patent back, it was really too close to the end of the patent to relicense it. So you do lose control and it doesn't always pan out, but sometimes it does. And obviously, the fact that there's so many of these, there's 8 different companies represented here, gave us a lot more versatility in companies that we could work for and the different kinds of products. We had products for environmental pollutants. We got EPA approval for those. Products for testing letters in the post office for biological warfare agents, products for food testing, for bacteria and toxins, products for looking at underwater for mines and harbors, and for testing for contaminants in drinking water. The diversity of the populations that we could impact was pretty much unlimited. It would have been much more limited if my focus had been on entrepreneurship in terms of starting a single company. But as far as the process is concerned, key to the process is the team. So this is the first crack. I'm going to talk about this process, but the first part of this process is understanding what your customer needs and developing a vision for how you're going to address the needs of that customer. That's a much more productive way of going about the process than saying, I have this technology, I have this hammer, who's got a nail? And then you can think about, well, what kind of skills, what kind of technologies, what kind of problem-solving capabilities do I need to realize my vision of how I'm going to solve this customer's problem? And you put the team together and develop new concepts and try to put a example of the solution together. So we've mapped this out, this process. And what I want to point out here is, while you start with problem awareness and you end up with a product, the IP creation is certainly very important. And the change to first to file has made a huge difference in when this IP creation needs to be done. When I first started this, we'd have 2 years or 3 years to think about whether or not it was worth filing IP, whether or not the ideas that we had in the technology were critical. Now you have to do it so fast. The freedom to operate considerations tend to be a bit preliminary. There's a lot more optimism involved in the process, and it's not as thoughtful, I think, as it used to be. There's a lot more urgency. There's also an aspect that I think that needs a lot more attention, and that's who are the inventors. I have taken my name off patents that 2 of my undergraduates did, because one of the things a lot of academics don't realize, if you get those inventors wrong, your whole patent can be invalidated. So you have to make sure every inventor has an innovative contribution to something that's in the claims, not just in the specs, but in the claims. And you'd better get that right off the bat. My recommendation is always let the attorneys to decide who should be on the patent. Let everybody who thinks they made an inventive contribution to the claims put in a description and let the attorneys decide. Don't leave it up. Don't assume that you have the right information to make that decision. So that's basically the roadmap. I think many of you are familiar with all of this. But it also, this needs, I don't know if there's a pointer on here, yeah. The new directions and problem solving that come out of existing IP development are not to be ignored, because in many cases the IP needs to be a family of patents, not simply a single patent, if you really want a strong IP presence in a particular area. As an example, we're working on right now solves the problem of the microfluidic chip in a lab. I don't know how many of you are familiar enough with this field, but there are a lot of very sexy microfluidic devices that have been developed, but they all have big pumps or valves associated with them, especially pumps. So one of the things we did to get these technologies out of the lab and into the hands of users, particularly for diagnostics and environmental monitoring, is to develop a pump made out of paper that you can make for less than a penny. So we're developing, it has a very small footprint, it's inexpensive, we're developing that. So we've got the team together, we've got some funding to develop it. We've filed the patents, both US and foreign, started making the papers public so that, and this is one of the first stages of marketing for an academic group. The marketing is well underway, but it needs a lot more work. It seems like you're never done with marketing. As an academic, you cannot assume that your technology transfer department will do it for you. You have to assume responsibility for marketing, because they simply don't have the expertise in all areas of your university research work. So those are some of the things we're doing. Our postdoc made 100 calls for potential stakeholders, whether they were users, potential manufacturers, or potential licensees. And we still haven't transferred the technology. If anybody's interested, the license is available. This is what it looks like. I don't know if I can get this going. Can somebody run the videos? Okay, they're running, one of them. Basically, it's a pump that you can put on a microfluidic system. You can control the flow rate and the volume of any fluids coming through, even whole blood. But what's really unique is you can stack these things. So you can create a variable flow rate. So you can basically program them, and they're just nothing more than bits of paper and plastic. But they're pre-programmable for whatever kinds of flow profile you need. So how do you realize your vision? If you have a technology that you want to put in the hands of the users, the first thing you have to do is give up on the idea that you can do it all. You don't have to know all the answers. You can recruit partners in this process, whether they are other engineers or scientists, or whether they're lawyers, people from your tech transfer department, and eventually people to help you market it and transfer it to a company, or if you really want to, help you build a company. But you have to identify all of the expertise you need and make sure you find the best possible partners you can to work with. And then you cannot be too terribly proprietary. No idea is created good. Every single one has to be massaged to make it a great idea. So every good project develops a life of its own. And like our kids growing up and going off to college and off to their own professional experience, while they will come back to you to ask for help now and then, you need to let them go and let them run. So I would, at the end of this talk, I'd like you to go away with just the idea of being a team. This is a process. It's not a single event. This idea of technology commercialization, technology development, and enjoy the ride. Thank you very much. And I have a minute to ask the question. I can't either.
It's a great talk. I just like your comment on observation I've made. I've licensed both to startup companies and to existing companies, and so I was very interested in your comments. But one observation I've made is that one differentiating factor is that some patents are about single products, and some patents are about platforms. And what I found is, if I had to distinguish, one option from another, it would be to license single product to existing companies, because most sustainable companies are made up of portfolios of products. And while that's not the advantage for a portfolio or a platform patent, because generally they will only develop one product out of it, and so you don't get the value of the patent completely that way. So what's your comment about that?
We've struggled with the same thing, and generally, most of the ones that have been successful have been platforms with multiple applications. And whether they go to, we've had the best success with medium-sized companies because they're focused enough on the technology that they don't shelve it, or big companies, when the management changes, the priority often changes, and that's a real problem. The startup companies, the biggest problem is they have no marketing arm. They can make it, they're good at the technology, but then they don't have the resources to know how to sell it effectively. So in our experience, it's not so much whether it's a platform or a single-use thing. And most of the things we've done have had to be multiple use to get a civilian and a military application. But finding that company that both has A, the motivation, B, the technical competence, and C, the marketing capability. We can help them with the technical competence, but we can't help them with the level of commitment and the marketing, and those things are so important. Our most successful product to date got licensed to a small diagnostics company called MBio, but it was part of a big company, and the president of the big company left the big company to take the small company and has made a big success out of it. So it's that personal leadership and finding that a really talented partner is just huge.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The second paper is presented by Nasser Peygambarian. The title from University of Arizona. The title is Entrepreneurial and Commercial Activities of the University.